for fast, cheap, and reliable Madden 21 Ultimate Team coins. Make sure you guys go check out my sponsor, Easy Mutt. Use code VENM at checkout for 5% off. Yo, what's up guys, Venom Fire here, back with another video, and today I'm going to be bringing you guys what my favorite features are about Madden 22. This is throughout the Madden 22 beta. I've played a lot more games today. In that last video I did yesterday, I kind of bashed the game a lot. Those were just my raw initial thoughts, of course, so I wasn't going to hold back on anything in particular. I wanted to keep things unfiltered, what I truly thought about the game, and most of them were negative. I wanted to be kind of constructive in my criticism, so I was giving you guys the things that I thought needed to be fixed, but I want to talk about some things in a positive fashion, why I think that this game can be great, can be good, and some of the features that I like that EA actually added. So we're going to go ahead and start out with just the overall game, and I think just starting out our list here, it appeals to pretty much every type of audience. So that's kind of how I'm going to word it. What I mean by this, what I mean by appeals to every type of audience, is that I think this year's game and the base gameplay does a really good job of appealing to a competitive player who only cares about the gameplay, doesn't care about, you know, if it's realistic, doesn't care about necessarily how it looks. He just cares that the game is balanced, things like that. But it also has to appeal to the sim type players who want to make sure that the game looks good, the game runs good, the game plays realistic, to where Patrick Mahomes actually moves like Patrick Mahomes or things like that. So I actually do think this game does a pretty good job of doing that. In the Madden 21 Next Gen game in particular, I do not think that game was pretty good in executing that, but I do think this game is a lot better in doing so. Now, there still are a couple of things that I find a little bit unrealistic. I still think change of direction is a little bit too slow. I do think NFL players can change their direction relatively quickly. It's pretty difficult to do that in a video game, so I can understand where they're coming from, but the game does not do a very good job of executing that, so that is, of course, just a small issue, but overall, in hindsight, the game does a pretty good job of appealing to both the competitive player. Not only that, but I do think the game is actually pretty balanced in what happens, and this is going to kind of bring us into our next point, so I'll actually just create another sub point right here, and it's going to be just the issues with the game seem to go both ways, and this is a big issue big fix for me. We're just going to word this: issues seem to go both ways. I'll of course explain what that means, but I noticed that there of course could be some dice rolls in the game, such as a player keeping their feet in bounds, which of course can have to do with trait, but there's different dice rolls, tackling animations, hit stick animations, QB fatigue, just different things that aren't really necessarily dice rolls but drop picks, things like that. And I think this year's game does a pretty solid job at keeping those balanced for both players. Typically in the years past, you could have situations where a single player or side could be getting cheated by one particular thing, and then it just doesn't happen on the other side. It could be like drop picks. One player's dropping picks, the other player's not. In the games that I've played, small sample size, of course, but in the games that I've played, I noticed that doesn't happen a whole lot. I notice very balanced things happening on both sides. I don't necessarily notice one player getting a little bit more unlucky than the other. If something happens, it'll probably happen to the other player. If I drop a pick, I notice my opponent potentially dropping a pick as well, throwing it into coverage. Of course, there are different things that depend on the teams that you're using, like block sheds. Of course, the ratings matter, so you have to take those types of things into account. Why is my player not getting open? Well, he's being covered in one-on-one by Jalen Ramsey versus your guy's being covered, or my guy's being covered by some bum corner. So things like that, of course, you have to keep in mind, but the game does a pretty good job. Sheds seem pretty balanced. I notice myself getting block sheds, my opponent getting block sheds when we're using relatively the same teams, same overall, things like that. So overall, I noticed some simple things happening. I want to talk about another fix, or not necessarily a fix, but something I noticed happening a little bit less, and that's going to be the throw out of sacks. Now, this could be just the games that I've played, but I have not experienced too many of these throw out of sacks resulting in interceptions, especially as much in Madden 21. This is a big problem going into the year that I was really hoping would get fixed, and I feel like they did a pretty good job. Now, it is a pretty reliable test because I haven't really used the Packers more than one game. So I've played probably 15 plus games, around 20 games. I only use the Packers once, so I'm using QBs that take longer to release the football. And I haven't thrown one throw out of sack pick. Of course, I'm usually throwing the ball heavy in my offenses. Haven't thrown one interception as a result of that. Not only that, but my opponents have not thrown an interception on a throw out of sack. So I feel like that is pretty balanced. I do give a lot of credit to EA for fixing that, because that was one of the most frustrating things for not only me but for the entire community this year. The throw out of sack was very, very frustrating to say the least, and I feel like they did a pretty solid job at fixing that. So I do take my hat off to EA on the throw out of sack issue, and this just goes back to the thing where just simply balancing things out, balancing out issues, and again, throw out of sack is another one right here. The next thing that we're going to go ahead and be talking about is going to be the defensive balances or defensive consistencies in the game. You see I put it in parentheses, going to be tackling and jumping as far as linebackers or safeties are concerned. I have noticed some good things with this. I noticed that the tackling is very balanced in this game. The hit sticks seem to be balanced. The conservative tackles seem to be balanced. It's a very good fix. You have a little bit more animations. You have a little bit more diversity. I noticed the wrap tackles look a little bit better. Your warp tackles tapping A. Your dive tackles where you would tap X or square. So I noticed those are a lot more balanced. Hit sticks, of course, they're pretty balanced because, again, and hit sticks usually were balanced. That's not necessarily anything new. If you have a player with high hit power, he's going to hit stick. If you have a player with low hit power, he's not going to be able to hit stick. So those have kind of always been balanced, but tackling seems a lot improved. It seems a little bit more realistic. One thing that I like a lot that was supposed to be a big change in Madden 21 is the players are supposed to recognize where they are at. It was part of the Reach For It program that was hyped up. That didn't really end up being a thing outside of the goal line, and even then it got patched a little bit later in the year, but I noticed that the sideline gets recognized a lot more as far as that is concerned. That's something that I do like. And of course, the jumping, I don't notice different players jumping higher than other players. I notice as far as interceptions go, pretty balanced stuff. This animation seemed to be consistent. One player won't get a little bit more unfortunate than the other player, and that is of course something that is ideal for yourself. You don't want one player jumping up in the air 20 feet, and you don't want your guy not being able to jump at all. Now, of course, ratings, I know those have an effect on everything, but everything seems a little bit balanced. It seems a little bit more smoother, and I'm sure that you guys will be able to tell that when you actually get the game. So that is something that I enjoy. The next thing that we're going to talk about is route running. I do enjoy the way that the routes are run. Now, I could be a little bit different in this, but I feel like the route running is a lot more realistic from that standpoint. Really, it seems to be pretty consistent. It looks a lot more realistic, but the result seems to be the same. So that could be an issue for some people. If you're competitive, you might not like it as much. It doesn't maybe look as good to you as far as throwing the ball is concerned, but it's pretty good. I enjoy the route running. That's going to kind of take us into our next point, which is going to be the user catching, which I kind of already talked about yesterday, but I'll talk about it again. User catching is very good. If you guys didn't know, if you guys aren't playing the game, something that you can do this year when you're user catching is hold the left trigger, and your player will actually strafe up like he's a defender, like you're in coverage, like you're using, you hold that left trigger or that L2 button, and your player will strafe up, he'll slow down. That's something that you can actually use as part of the user catching interface. And not sure if that was necessarily intended to be. I hadn't heard anything about it, but that is something I learned when playing the game. You can actually hold L2 to kind of slow your player up. This comes in handy where if your quarterback, he'll underthrow a ball, whether it's deep, whatever the case may be, and you can actually kind of hold that L2 button, move yourself into a little bit better position. Also, maybe if you throw it in coverage, you can kind of hold L2, get better positioning on the ball. And overall, it should just help you a lot more from that standpoint. So that is something that I enjoy as far as the offensive side of the ball is concerned. So user catching is one thing that I did personally like. The next thing that we're going to talk about, which is going to be potentially the last thing of this video is going to be the blocking system. I do like the blocking system a lot this year. I know some people who have kind of hated on the blocking system. I personally like it. I feel like it's been pretty consistent. I haven't noticed myself getting shedded too much. Of course, guys like Grady Jarrett's an absolute beast in this game. I don't know why, but every time I lab against the Falcons or play against the Falcons, he's splitting instant double teams every single time. But blocking's pretty consistent. I notice, four-man rushes seem to be about the same for both players. That's something that you want to have as a competitive standpoint. Of course, your superstars will get off the block a little bit faster, but, everything seems to be constant. You're not really getting too many random, two-man blitzes where a guy's just coming through instantly, things like that. Everything seems to be pretty consistent, stepping up in the pocket, things like that, of course, work the same for both players. So everything does seem pretty consistent from the blocking standpoint. That goes for run blocking and pass blocking. The run blocking seems pretty good as well. Of course, downfield blocking is still an issue, I think, from the games that I've played, but not too big of an issue as far as that's concerned. So overall, these are going to be the reasons why I think this game can be good. Let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree. This list can be added to again. At the end of the beta, I might put together an entire list of the pros and cons, what I agree with, what I disagree with, every bug in the game, what I think is good. And also let me know if you want to make a video on just the things that I dislike, or the reasons why Madden 22 could go south. So let me know in the comments if you want to see that video. Anyways, this has been your boy Venom Fire. Make sure you go ahead, like that video, subscribe to the channel as well for more of these content videos. Follow me on Twitter, link will be down below in the description, and peace. I'm out of here.